How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Coliseum Chronicles Live, Episode 2. I'm Casey Kasliner, joined alongside Terrence Holton. We both are the insiders for USC at USC, all things USC sports. Terrence, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty great. Excited to talk a little football with you. We're doing a little early today. Had some scheduling conflicts, but excited to be here.
Yeah, last week we talked about the schedule as a whole. Now we sort of look at the nuances, the sort of the positional controversies, you could say, maybe, but just more so the interesting changes that we've seen now with Danton Lynn now in his second year as the USC defensive coordinator. They bring in Rob Ryan. Eric Henderson has been a great recruiter. It feels like defensively on the coaching side, they have a really solid group that they can go out and recruit and bring in some high profile transfers as well as some young guys. So I'm excited for the defense this year, and we should break down the DBs today.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So of course the main losses for USC and the DB side, of course, Jalen Smith, he's probably going to get drafted. He was very good last year for USC. He had a really nice interception in that Nebraska game. I remember. I think he had two that game. He might have. I don't know. He had at least one in that game. And then you lose Achille Arnold. And so, you have to bring in transfers. USC did that. They bring in Bishop Fitzgerald, DJ Harvey. They have some guys who were young last year move up a little bit. And so what are your initial thoughts just seeing this DB group and how it fares in the Big Ten, just right off the depth chart itself?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it a little pre going live. It is an interesting group because at the top, there is a lot of just really experienced guys who have played 4 years, who are coming into their fifth year. You look at Harvey, you look at Fitzgerald, but behind them on the depth chart, it's a lot of guys who are unproven. You look at the Marcellus Williams, you look at Marquise Gallegos of the world. It's a lot of guys who are unproven and need to show what they can do. They were highly recruited out of high school. Time to prove it.
Yeah, and USC's passing defense in terms of yards last year was 98th in the country, I believe. And so, they were winning a lot of games. They're winning all their games really based on the offense doing enough to, be serviceable and sort of, the defense holding its own. But they were still giving up a lot of passing yards in a Big Ten conference that, has good quarterbacks, of course. But, you're playing against a team like Washington. You should be containing a guy like Will Rogers, right? I mean, that's the reality. Maybe you get a free pass against Drew Aller and Tyler Warren on offense. But like I said, and I correct myself, one interception in the Nebraska game for Jalen Smith, one in the Maryland game. So you had two on the year. And you bring in guys like DJ Harvey, Bishop Fitzgerald, who have interceptions last year. They have a lot of pass breakups. And so, I think really – for USC, I think it kind of moved. They move into a era of their program where they were relying on, sort of serviceable defense and high-powered offense to, win games. Now you bring in some really good coaches, and you're losing some pieces this year, like Achille Arnold, who was very good, but he also dealt with injuries, and then Jalen Smith. And you replace that with guys who maybe don't seem as skilled on paper. But again, I mean, I think both Bishop Fitzgerald and DJ Harvey on top of Kamari Ramsey returning. And that was a big question. But DJ Harvey last year, 4 interceptions. He went to San Jose State, of course, maybe a little bit easier competition, especially in the quarterback department. I mean, the Mountain West was not a great quarterback conference last year. But still, I mean, he had a lot of tackles, 40 solo tackles on the year. I mean, not bad for a guy coming out of San Jose State. Bishop Fitzgerald, 3 interceptions, 8 pass breakups. Again, in an ACC conference that's not super quarterback heavy. However, he did, play well against Kyle McCord in Syracuse. Also had to play against Nico Iamaleava and Tennessee. And so, it's interesting to look at where these guys come from. A little bit weaker maybe from a conference standpoint. But then Kamari Ramsey, he had 1 pick last year. He had 5 pass breakups. But Terrence and I were talking about this before the show started. He's a guy that does more than what shows on the stat sheet. He's a guy that hits hard. He can force breakups using his physicality when he lowers his shoulder. Kamari Ramsey is an elite player, probably an early draft pick next year if he can keep it up. And then you have some more depth guys like Marcellus Williams, didn't play much last year as a redshirt. And then Prophet Brown played more in the nickel. Of course, we saw a lot of injuries on the DB side last year. And then, even going further into the depth chart, a guy like Braylon Conley, who has a lot of high upside. He's one of those Southern recruits that Lincoln Riley recruited a lot, the past couple of years. He didn't play at all last year, but he could slot in maybe in the corner at some point. So, and then Kennedy Urlacher as well. He's coming in.
We got to mention Kennedy Urlacher. I mean, past couple of days, that is a huge addition to the secondary. That guy is exciting, super quick, good open field tackler. Only reason I think he didn't see the field more last year, that Notre Dame secondary was incredibly good. That's really the main reason for that. So I think I'm excited to see what he can do. I've seen he can play in the nickelback. He plays safety a decent amount. That's like his primary position. So I'm excited to see what he can do on the field. That's a fun player to add in the board.
Yeah, and he's not the biggest guy. Like, he's not like a towering force. He's not like a freak athlete per se, but he's so logical. He's a logical player. He's great at ball tracking. He, I think is going to be a stout pair with, the DB group, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, he's coming over from Notre Dame, where you're getting coached very well on that defensive side. We see Xavier Watts. He's going to be probably a first-round draft pick. They had plenty of depth last year at the safety position. And so, a guy like Urlacher wasn't necessarily, like you said, getting as much of the spotlight last year. But again, he had a very promising season. Of course, USC brings in Chad Bowden, general manager, and he has ties to Notre Dame, so that definitely had a part in it. But I'm really excited for Kennedy Urlacher. He had 7 solo tackles last year, only 1 pass breakup, no interceptions. But again, he's a guy that, you look at his game log, he wasn't getting the snaps that other guys were getting. He didn't play in every game. He actually did play against USC, had a tackle in that game. Again, he had 1 pass breakup that came against Purdue. And so it's been a limited sample size for him. He was only a freshman last year, but for a freshman, I mean, very impressive to see, sort of his mechanical work on the defensive side. Maybe didn't have the stats necessarily, but he also wasn't getting the snaps. And he also had to compete with guys like Xavier Watts, who are, of course, very
one of, if not the best safeties in this upcoming NFL draft. I think we should mention this. Christian Pierce Jr. It's an interesting question where he will be at. He's going to be really competing a lot, obviously, with the Urlachers, with all those guys for the safety position, with Bishop Fitzgerald, It'll be interesting to see if he gets on the field much. I think it's super possible we see the safeties change in and out throughout the season. Correct me if I'm wrong, especially at that strong safety position, just because there's obviously experience there, but Pierce has seen the field a lot less than Fitzgerald has in their collegiate careers, obviously at a different team, but it will be a little bit difficult for him to get on the field, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, the strong safety position, well, really the whole safety group as a whole, not a ton of depth there, right? Like, you lose Achille Arnold, you have 2 true freshmen in Treston Castro, Kendarius Reddick. They're probably going to be the 3rd or 4th safeties at the respective free and strong safeties. Do you think Kennedy Urlacher is the starting strong safety on day one over Bishop Fitzgerald, who's a redshirt senior?
I don't think you can confidently say that. I mean, obviously he's young. He's so young, and I feel like it's more like I could totally see him on the field a lot more than I think he would get at Notre Dame. That's probably why he transferred. But I don't think he'll be the starter from day one. I think when you have a guy like Fitzgerald who has seen the field a lot more and is just that much more experience, he will be the starter from day one. Does not mean that guys like Christian Pierce or Kennedy Urlacher can get on the field, though.
Yeah, I mean, the depth, we'll talk about other positions in other weeks. But, we saw USC lose some players on the DB side. We already talked about a couple of them. But again, I mean, I think, and Terrence and I were also talking about, before the show started, that 2026 makes for an even more important year, because we're not only going to see a big recruiting class potentially come in, but also because we're going to have the chance to see this year how some of the younger guys, like Braylon Conley, can sort of adapt, but not even just on the corner side, like Marquise Gallegos, Kadarius Reddick. We saw a lot of injuries last year on the DB side. That allowed for guys like Marcellus Williams to come in, to Carlos Nicholson, Prophet Brown. And I honestly thought there was some good upside there from those guys. I think Prophet Brown is kind of underrated. I think he's a guy who, if you see injuries or maybe, if Lincoln Riley wants to go in a different direction with Danton Lynn, I think we could definitely see him coming in and getting some good snaps, maybe not just at the nickel, but maybe a bigger role as well. I don't know. What do you think of the depth at the corner and safety positions, maybe particularly the safety? Because I think there's a lot more depth at the corner positions, but what do you see there at the safety?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned it before. I think so. Obviously, the free safety position that's shut down. It's Kamari Ramsey's job. If not, it's one of the best safeties in the country by far, in my opinion. I don't even think I'm biased saying that. He had a fantastic year. His 2 years, he's really seen the field at UCLA and USC. He's been fantastic. In my opinion, easy first, either day one, day two pick. But there's a lot less depth, as you mentioned, at that safety position. It's interesting where they'll go. I'm just kind of looking at it right now. I could see Gallegos maybe getting snaps at the strong safety, seeing if there's injuries, things like that. That strong safety position, it's not at all wrapped up at all, though.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then, I mean, we talk about depth. I mean, the cornerback group is a lot younger. This is a young team, right? Like we've talked about it last week. As we see, yeah, I mean, Fitzgerald, I agree. I think he'll start. And you're going to have, maybe, the schedule earlier on, a chance to sort of put those guys out, as we've seen. We talked about the schedule last week. You have a couple of free games in there, Purdue included maybe. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see. And like you said, the free safety position, you have Marquise Gallegos as the backup to, Kamari Ramsey. I think he could learn a lot under Kamari Ramsey. It'll be interesting to see as well, because Kamari Ramsey's a redshirt junior. He has a lot of experience. He probably has his, eyes set on the draft. And so he could be a really good mentor to some of those guys. But the cornerback position's young, right? Because, Marcellus Williams could very well be the starting cornerback, at least on the right side for USC, one of the starting cornerbacks, and he's only a redshirt freshman, right? So, that is a kind of a question mark. DeCarlos Nicholson is a little bit older. We just haven't seen much from him. He's been injured. And then, on the other side, of course, DJ Harvey will probably lock that down, but also young, right? Because you have, after him, it's Braylon Conley and then Tristan Castro. Both those guys are freshmen. So I think at the cornerback position, maybe less so than the safety position, you see it's a good group, but if you're you're one injury away from having to put in a first-year player, which isn't a problem, but it's just something to think about in the sense that this is a young group and they're going to go into places like Oregon, like Notre Dame, and have to deal with, kind of an opposing offense that can do a lot of things. But I want to talk a little bit, maybe open this up a little bit beyond USC, because, I think for the Trojans this year, we talked last week about the schedule. You're playing, you're a little luckier because you're playing a slate of teams on your schedule with a weaker quarterbacks across the board, right? You're not playing Penn State this year. You'll play Bryce Underwood maybe, and he's supposed to be very good, but he's a wild card. It could be Mikey Keene, right? You're playing Oregon. Dante Moore is kind of a wild card. So how do you think that sort of how do you see that sort of translating to the defense, especially in the secondary?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it already, but they weren't a great pass defense last year, obviously 98th in the country against, it's not a great passing conference in the Big Ten. It was fine. Obviously placing against like Drew Allers and the Tyler Warrens is different, but it wasn't a great pass defense. So I think playing against guys who haven't gotten that much experience, Will and D just mentioned, Underwood was shaky in the spring game. You got to take advantage of the guys who have gotten less snaps at quarterback. You got to take advantage of the Underwoods. You have to take advantage of the Dante Moores because they will make mistakes. That's the reality, especially a freshman like Underwood. I'm not going to say playing in a difficult environment in USC, but playing away is definitely a lot harder, obviously. So I think you have to really take advantage of that. And I think this team, the defense, will make strides. This is probably the DBs. Especially because a lot of these guys, they sat last year, they didn't play, and they learned. That is really key. That you don't see that a lot happening in college athletics anymore. So I think it's really important that a lot of these guys sat and learned the defense.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the schedule, because we talked about it last week, you host Michigan State. A guy like Aiden Childs is going to make mistakes, right? He's a guy that forces a lot of balls. Like that's free opportunities for not just guys like Kamari Ramsey, but depth players and some of the younger freshmen we talked about to step up. I think the litmus test will be like on the road against Illinois, facing off against Luke Altmaier on the road. That's going to be really tough. I don't think I don't have doubts that they can get it done there, USC, but again, it's going to be hard. Also, we didn't talk about this last week because it hadn't happened yet. Nico Iamaleava going to UCLA. That's the last game of the year. Again, I don't think he's as good as a quarterback as $4 million suggests, or however much he was getting at Tennessee.
UCLA definitely didn't give him $4 million.
Definitely not, but he got that much at Tennessee, or he wanted that much at Tennessee, and he didn't get it. But the point is, that makes UCLA a little bit better team, undeniably. I mean, they go from Joey Aguilar to,
no disrespect to Joey Aguilar, but come on.
Yeah. And I think this is a good point by Donnell Smith as well, because, the D-line putting pressure. I mean, we just didn't see much pressure from the D-line last year. Really just not much. I mean, we had high expectations. Guys like Bear Alexander coming into the year. He didn't do anything really to prove his worth. And let's be honest, it's true.
And he transferred after 3 games. He got sick of it after the Michigan game and transferred.
Yeah. That forced guys like Eric Gentry to have to basically be a D lineman. I mean, Eric Gentry was basically
also hurt for a lot of last year.
He was hurt as well. And
not to interrupt you, but also Anthony Lucas. There was lots of injuries on that D line.
There was Gavin Meyer. I liked his play at times. Yeah, but I mean, again, it was just a group that we talk about depth. They had little depth and they didn't have the talent they have this year. So those two things in conjunction with each other, just USC was not, and you're going against some really good offensive lines in the Big Ten. And so, last year it was just, you didn't see much pressure from USC on the quarterback. And I think this year with the D line improving, you're going to just allow guys like Eric Gentry to slot back in more into the linebacker, into the box, and be able to do different things. I want to see Eric Gentry break up some passes this year. I think that'd be really exciting.
Use those long arms. He was fantastic in the games he played. That's just the reality. But I obviously was obviously dealing with injuries. So
yeah, and I think again, we're in the stages of practice right now. I want to hear next few weeks and maybe even a 10 practice. Like, what is Kennedy Urlacher going to look like? What is the type of player he can form into? Of course, Notre Dame's defense was constructed much differently than USC's defense last year, right? So, they had a lot more talent across the board. And of course, their schedule was a lot easier than USC's, undeniably, but they still had to go through the college football playoff. And respect to Notre Dame. They went to the national championship, but at the same time, they had an easier ride. They didn't have to play against some of these Big Ten offenses that are not necessarily pass heavy, but they're very mixed and they can do a lot of different things. They have dual threat players. We'll definitely see that in games like Oregon. We might see that in games like UCLA. We might. That's the reality. Nico can move, right? So that's going to allow for guys like Eric Gentry in the linebacker position to have to be a little more versatile. And we know Eric Gentry can be versatile. We saw him in his first year at USC in 2023. He was great. That Cal game, he's the only reason they won that with that SWAT. And so we know he can defend passes. We know he can sack the quarterback if he needs to, or get tackles for losses if he needs to. But maybe take that pressure off him and have a better pass rush, and then have a better pass defense along with that to allow the linebacker group that we can preview, I'm sure, in a future episode to, of course, just have more depth. And so it'll probably be Desmond Stevens at the middle linebacker with Eric Gentry out wide. Do you think?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I think Gentry can do either, but I would agree with that. Yeah. Because Stevens is great.
The point is you have Stevens and Gentry starting. Of course, you lose, and we'll preview more of the linebacker group later. But
they lost basically all their linebackers except for Gentry, of course.
Yeah, and him coming back is huge because, I honestly, if he transferred, I don't know if I would have blamed the guy, honestly, because he got hurt. Look, USC is a program I think guys should play at, and I think that's across the board. But he already transferred to USC from Arizona State. He had battled the injury bug. I'd love him to stay. The point I'm trying to make, I wasn't counting at him staying at USC. I thought there's a chance he leaves. and he ended up staying, and I respect the loyalty. And so, a guy like Eric Gentry is a guy who can do a lot of different things. We're going to see that with some of the guys maybe coming out of the 26 class. There's a few athletes in that group that can do a lot of different things. So I don't know. I think overall the depth on the D line helps out the pass rush. And I think we're going to find out in the next few weeks through practice, like I said, what does Kennedy Urlacher look like? Is Kamari Ramsey put on some size? Is he a guy that's, still the same Kamari Ramsey we know? We've heard already, I've heard reports that DJ Harvey and Bishop Fitzgerald are pretty much wowing Rob Ryan and Danton Lynn. Like they've been very good so far in practice. Of course, we'll see how that translates to games. Like we don't have a spring game this year. It probably would have been like this past weekend if it did happen.
It definitely would have. I was seeing some memories. I mean, we were both covering last year's spring game, obviously. I was going to mention, I was kind of waiting to mention this, but I saw the thing I think of when I think Marcellus Williams is he had an incredible interception in last year's spring game. So I'm a little sad that we won't be able to see something like that. Just obviously the spring game doesn't mean much. I will, of course, say this. I was a bigger fan of Jaden Maava after the spring game than I was Miller Moss. Of course, no one will believe me, but that's just kind of what I thought. But it doesn't give much, but it gives something. And I would have liked something. We could have done an episode on the spring game. We could have broken down the spring game. So thank you for that, USC.
Yeah, I see both sides of it. Like it's NIL, so like everyone's so secretive about everything. And, like reality is there's some shady stuff going on always in college football. Like even before NIL, we all know like there's always been stuff going on. So like I understand like closing it off, but at the same time, it's like the depth chart is, I'd say, and you could chime in here. I think the depth chart right now, especially on the defensive side, is pretty secure. But like I think if we had a spring game, like we'd be able to tell like, okay, like where is
just what a spring game is.
Like, what do the linebackers look like? Like that's sort of a question I have. Like, is Gentry going to have a different role this year? He was doing a lot last year.
Looking on the offense, what are the running backs going to look like?
Yeah, exactly. Both sides of the ball. And of course, that defensive back depth that we already talked about. I mean, I think we were pretty much set on who the 1 and 2, like the 2 deep for the DBs, but
I think so.
What about the true freshmen? There's a lot of young freshmen coming in on the defensive side. I mean, I'm pretty sure every defensive position in the DB department has a true freshman I'm pretty sure because Treston Castro, Kendarius Reddick, Steve Miller, Alex Graham, and James Johnson, are all young guys. And I think they would have been cool to see. But besides the point, we can't change the fact that there's no spring game. So we'll just have to live with practice reports coming out and going to practice ourselves. But I mean, kind of stacking up with the rest of the team because, this USC team has a lot of different good positional groups. Where do you kind of see the DBs ranking within the whole context of the team?
Yeah, it's tough because obviously we've been looking at this a lot. I don't think they're the best on the defense. I don't think I'll say 4th best, and I'm going to put them behind I think the defensive line is the best. We'll obviously break down all these in a later episode, but defensive line, wide receivers, running backs, then probably I'd say DBs.
I like that. No, you're good. I'd probably go with the same as you. I think like if we're grouping tight ends into pass catchers, as one group, I think running backs is interesting because there's a lot of question marks. Like we know that this is probably going to be a good running back room. Like we know Waymon Jordan had a very good, not just good, he had a like generational JUCO year. Yeah, he basically won the Heisman, right? So there's that. You bring in Eli Sanders, who's proven. You have Brian Jackson, who was very good. So I think running backs are still up there. I tend to agree. I think 4th best is fair. I think linebackers are one of the weaker spots, just because, not because Eric Gentry isn't good, because he's incredible, but it's because
he's a people around, in my opinion. It's a lot of unproven.
You can't put everything into the Eric Gentry basket. He's a guy who wants to do everything. He has the NFL body. And I agree with Will ND here. I mean, it's very intriguing. Every running back feels different too. You don't have, last year you had some similarities with that because a guy like Quentin Joyner was just a guy who could run through an entire defense, whereas Woody Marks, he could do that, but he was more of a pass catcher. He could create space himself. He was really good in the valve, kind of just, in the flats. Whereas I felt like Quentin Joyner was better, kind of, just run up the middle. The dude can get 15 yards easily. We're not going to have that this year with both guys moving on elsewhere, but we'll see how that shapes out. A lot of question marks, a lot of positive question marks. We're not concerned that they won't be good, but we're more so wondering what they'll look like.
We don't know what's going to happen with it. I don't think anyone does. That would be, as I mentioned, another thing from the spring game that would have been interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think the tight ends as well, because Lake McCree battled some injuries last year, just a really scary knee injury at Michigan last year that sidelined him. And he was honestly, he was, I think, one of the better tight ends in the country. He was one of the better tight ends in the country going into that. And I think that injury messed him up. He wasn't the same after that. He had some drops.
He was Miller Moss's favorite target early in last season, like by far.
And I think some of that came with just there being too many receivers that like were battling for passes to catch. And it's fair. They're going in a different direction this year, hopefully. I don't want to see Jaden Mayava throw the ball 50 times a game. I don't think anybody does. I don't think Jaden Mayava does either. But yeah, the tight end group, you have Walker Lyons, you have Joey Olsen, Walter Matthews as well. Let's highlight this comment right here, though, because I know we're not talking about receivers this episode, but Xavier Jordan, Prince Strachan from Boise State. So I heard personally that there was a chance, and take this with a grain of salt, because again, we don't have an official depth chart yet, so this is all speculation. But I've heard from other sources that Prince Strachan would be kind of the fourth option behind Lake McCree, and then of course the 1 and 2 would be Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon. I think it's kind of hard to assign one of them 1 or 2 because they're both different receivers.
They both do different things very well.
Yeah, Mekhi Lemon can stretch the field. Jacoby Lane is just a jump ball guy who can. If you toss Jacoby Lane the ball in the end zone from really anywhere, he can catch it. Like, he's a one-on-one ball guy. I really like Xavier Jordan. I remember when they recruited him, I did a lot of research on his game. He's not the biggest guy. USC has liked those bigger receivers these past few years with Jacoby Lane, Prince Strachan, Deuce Robinson. I don't think Xavier Jordan's going to get that many snaps because you have Corey Sims also. And I think Corey Sims is really intriguing. However, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in Xavier Jordan for screenplays. He has speed. And I believe he right now would be the second Z receiver behind Jacoby Lane. So he's a guy who can go up and grab balls. However, I don't think he's going to get much time. I think Strachan's going to be a big red zone threat, though. And I think if you have Jacoby Lane on one side, you have Prince Strachan on the other, and then Mekhi Lemon kind of coming out of the flats, I think that's a super dangerous receiving group in the red zone.
Yeah. I'm calculating all of the heights. I would tend to agree with you. I think it's hard to, both these guys are relatively unproven, but when you're leaning just straight physical tools, Prince is what? Is he 6'5", 6'6"?
He's up there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you put into the red zone, you have 6'4" Jacoby Lane who catches everything, 6'5" Prince Strachan, and 6'6" Lake McCree. That is really hard to guard, just man to man or whatever. So I think I would probably lean Prince if I had to guess.
I would too. And looking at Xavier Jordan, I talked about lack of size. He's 5'11", 171. Again, that's kind of like a Zachariah Branch type numbers, right? He's not a tall guy. And that's not a bad thing, right? Mekhi Lemon's not a tall guy. He's arguably USC's best receiver. So I think that, we could see Xavier Jordan. I really liked him out of high school. I know he's a 4-star prospect. He out of Sierra Canyon, he's a local guy. He's a guy he has plenty of speed. And I've watched some of his tape. He's a great player. I really do like Xavier Jordan. I just don't know if there's room for him this year.
He's going to get a chance at some point. I like what we've talked about those early games, the Missouri States, the Georgia Southerns. He will get a chance in those games to prove that he belongs on the field.
Because there's also a guy like Jay Fair who's
it's an older guy. Yeah.
So yeah, I want to bring up this one as well. From Cam as well. Do you think 2 tight end sets and run, but also throw out of teams off, i.e. Stanford 5 years ago? I think so. We saw some of that. Yeah. We saw some of that a little bit last year when Lake McCree was healthy with Walker Lyons, it kind of being the blocking tight end. And then Lake McCree, being the pass catcher he is. I don't know. I think it also kind of comes down to again, what type of running back is Waymon Jordan going to be for this team? Same with Eli Sanders. I think they could be a very good tandem. But last year, seeing Woody Marks and Quentin Joyner, those were guys that didn't necessarily need the best blocking to do things, because Woody Marks could create space himself. He's a guy who's a pass catching running back. And then Quentin Joyner had the electricity and the juking ability. And so we'll see, if that is something they need. But I'd love to see it. I think we saw some of that last year.
I agree. I would love to see. I think this is a really talented tight end group, and then we'll break it down further in a later episode. I think there's a lot of talent in this tight end room. Joey Olsen, Walker Lyons, they're all talented guys. I think if you see a lot of 2 tight end sets, there's just any of those guys behind Lake McCree you could go to. So I would love to see that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it'll be interesting to see as well, because we're also, one thing we have not totally talked about yet, and this could be another future topic we bring up, is we're going to see a full season of Jade Mayava, and we don't know. We know what type of quarterback he is, but they didn't change the scheme around Mayava when Miller Moss got benched. And the scheme was have as many receivers as possible, really they were running like 7 receivers if you include tight ends and Woody Marks, games for pretty equal amounts of time. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if they go a more focused approach with Mayava. Maybe that cuts down the possibility of having to run some of these more kind of cerebrally constructed offensive schemes, because we know Lincoln Riley likes to do that. Maybe he goes simpler. I wouldn't mind that. I mean, I think simple offense can be better sometimes. And I think especially with a guy like Mayava, who isn't like Miller Moss in a lot of ways. So
most ways.
Yeah. But I mean, they're both, I think that's a whole other can of worms we could open. But I think the point I'm making is, Mayava can hit his targets, Moss can hit his targets, but I think at the end of the day, Mayava doesn't need all those tools necessarily, because he can run. So, that's one thing that we could talk about in the future as well, and revisit once we see, full season of Mayava, or just like a week 1 start from Mayava, right? I mean, just to see him control the offense, kind of gain the keys. And of course, he hasn't officially been named the starting quarterback yet, but
he will.
Yeah, he will be. Houston Longstreet, I know, has been very good in practice. He's looked very good. He's beyond his years. I mean, Juju Lewis, he's looked good as well, but
no, I don't need him. Don't need him.
I don't think USC wants that drama. I mean, the guy has a Darth Vader chain and some crazy cars already, and Longstreet has been very humble.
Darth Vader chain is pretty sweet, I won't lie, but we don't need him. We don't need him.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, we're coming up here on the half-hour mark. Terrence, do you have any sort of thoughts on the DB group going? Closing thoughts? Anything we didn't touch on?
I do want to ask you, where do you think that this position group kind of ranks Big Ten wise? Because it's obviously the Big Ten. It's such a run-heavy conference. You don't always get the best pass defenses that we see. Obviously, the Ohio States, Oregon has a great secondary. Even Washington, I throw up there. Where do you think that this group ranks within the Big Ten?
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me that question last year, I'd probably say toward the bottom, honestly. Like, I know they have Kamari Ramsey. I know they had, some Jalen Smith, Achille Arnold, like some solid players. But USC pass defense-wise last year was 12th in the Big Ten. Just ahead of UCLA, behind Washington, Wisconsin, Illinois, it goes on, right? So, again, I don't know what those other teams necessarily look like in terms of changes, because we don't know, how some of these schemes will change. I think, though, like, easily top 5. I think they can be top 5. Because I think you mentioned Oregon, Ohio State. You never know what a team like Penn State could do. Their defense has been very good. I know they're losing some pieces, but I think it's easily top 4, top 5. In terms of opponents that USC is playing, I think very, very much high up there. I mean, you're playing Oregon and you're playing Notre Dame, but I think top 4 in the Big Ten, honestly.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Before I answer that, though, I will answer this question from Will ND, and I don't think it's going to happen. Will Chelsea make top 4? I'm not going to talk too much about it. They're losing too much momentum. It's not going to happen. I've lost faith. But back to USC. I would say that I tend to agree top 5, because obviously I think Oregon, Ohio State, 1, 2, those, they just load up on all the talent they have, on all the talent there is. They are the best. They are the best teams of the Big Ten as of right now. But I would say 5 maybe, because you don't know some of the other teams you're going to get, because Washington is a very solid secondary. A sneaky decent team. They're gearing up to be a very solid team. So I would say 5 probably.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think, again, it's another question mark. We just don't know how they fit into the context. But I've also heard this as well. I've heard DJ Harvey in practice has gotten a lot of praise from Rob Ryan and the coaching staff. He's coming out from San Jose State, maybe not the best team last year, but they were pretty good. I mean, they had one of the best receivers. They were a good team overall with Nick Nash and whatnot. But the point I'm trying to make is their defense was not necessarily relied upon to win them games, but he stepped up and he was the kind of their alpha on that team. So I think for sure, I think DJ Harvey's definitely a big name to look out for in the secondary, especially with a guy like Kamari Ramsey staying. I think is bigger than just him staying for play, because I think him like letting these guys know what this team is about. He's been here for a year. He's been in LA for multiple years. I'm excited to see how Kamari Ramsey can not only get better, because I think Kamari Ramsey's, of course, their best defensive player, but I think there's still more for him to unlock. I think his ceiling has not been met yet. That's no knock against him. I think he's just, a guy who has a lot more untapped potential. Correct
me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think Ramsey's going to be one of the biggest leaders. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was it him or was it Achille Arnold who was the play caller on defense last year? Because it was one of the safeties, and I'm forgetting who. But that's a really big thing. It's usually, one of the linebackers. You probably expect Gentry, but I think it may have been Ramsey who was the signal caller for the defense. So I think he'll be really key for leadership wise. Back to the DJ Harvey thing real quick, though. This is a major prove-it year for him. Obviously, he spent 2 years at Virginia Tech, was a very solid player, but was never fantastic. And he was great last year with the Spartans. So he's coming back to Power 4, I should say. And I think this is going to be his year where it really shows out. I also think that we're going to see one of the best tackling groups that USC has seen in recent memory, at least definitely in our tenure at USC. Obviously, I've been here 3 years. You've been here too. They were terrible tackling my first 2 years, and obviously last year was pretty good. Ramsey's a great tackler. Harvey's a great tackler. You had Urlacher, great tackler. I think that we're going to see some phenomenal open field tackles from the DBs.
Yeah, because, I think the big thing for USC is limit the big play, right? Like we saw last year, Michigan had multiple big plays that are the only reason Michigan won that game, right?
Because of that long run, yeah.
If Kalel Mullings doesn't go for like 40 yards, USC wins that game. I don't know if it changes the season, but other games as well. It's that big play that USC has been unable to stop. And some of that came with the secondary. Some of that came with the linebacker core being kind of depleted. Some of that came with the D-line. You can't assess blame to one group last year. The defense across the board was just not – it was good. It was an improvement from the year prior, but it just was not a group that had a lot of cohesion on the tackling front. They were better. I'll give you that. They were better.
I mean, it's hard not to be better from the Alex Grinch era of tackling.
Yeah, don't even bring that name up. It's for sure. But I think now we're going to see pressure taken off from some of these groups just from them being able to bounce off each other. But again, I agree. I think this is going to be a good tackling group, and I think it's going to be an exciting defense that can make the big plays, get those big pass breakups, force 3 and outs, force early drives to be stuffed, and especially down the stretch too, because we saw USC kind of crumble in late games last year. Some of that was the offense's fault, but some of that was also the defense's fault. You could look at the Washington game. I was there. I mean, you saw the defense kind of crumble, and it was raining, I know, but still,
not really. That's not a good enough excuse.
Yeah, no excuses. So, yeah, I completely agree. But we're closing in on 40 minutes. If you have any final questions, if you're watching, feel free to or comments. Feel free to let us know. But we'll have some exciting stuff coming up in the next few weeks, previewing some more positions. And
going back to 7 p.m. on Mondays. We had a scheduling conflict today, but going back to 7 p.m.
Yeah, we are students, and so we do have sort of a busy. Excuse my camera not being on. I'm a little glitchy, but we are students here that we cover the team, so we are a little bit busy sometimes. But we definitely want to try to get at least one show out per week. Talk with you guys. We really appreciate everyone who tuned in. Happy late Easter, and definitely. Feel free to follow us on Twitter or X. My Instagram handle is also the same, and I'll be posting stuff as well. But I have updates. If you're a USC basketball fan, I've been posting depth chart predictions. If you want to see what the team next year looks like with guys transferring out, Terrence posts a lot of analysis. He has his own podcast as well. So make sure to tune in every Monday. That should be the plan going forward. And we'll have a lot more stuff. But Terrence, if you don't have anything else to say, I think that's kind of.
No, I don't think so. Overall, I mean, yeah, great show. We're going to be doing more position breakdown type stuff. Maybe talk a little USC basketball when we get to the thick of the off season. But yeah, great show.
Yeah, and if you missed anything, this is a video that will be posted. It is live right now, but you can go back and hear some of our takes, broke down the DB group as a whole and some of the other stuff on this team. But it should be an exciting year for the DBs and the defense as a whole. But with that, I think that pretty much wraps things up. So make sure to drop a like and subscribe and follow us everywhere on social media. And that'll pretty much do it. So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Next week. Fight on.